Welcome to the source. The source. Source. Hey, get the source.
Yo, good morning. Hope you all are having a nice morning. It's 10 a.m. Eastern time. Got a bunch of college football games to get through. It's obviously Saturday. Coming in off a nice Friday night, man. UCLA, money line. UCLA plus 6.5. That was sweet. And then for those of you that had Cal with me, I don't know if you watched the end of that game, but we didn't deserve it. Quarterback gets the first down, slides down like he's going to end the game, right? When you're like, oh, shit, they're just going to kneel on it. Next play, they hand it off. Dude runs for the touchdown. It's if you had Wake plus 7 in that game, I feel for you. I did not deserve that Cal win, but we got it. So a real nice Friday night, coming in with some momentum. We're going to go through, I think we have 26 games lined up for today, and we're starting off with a real scorcher. Purdue is in Columbus. As you probably could figure out, I don't think we're going to spend a ton of time on this game. The only reasonable case you can make for Purdue would be Ohio State coming off the huge win in Happy Valley, coming back home in a game that they might not care a ton about. So, I mean, I guess there's something, but the truth is, I think Ohio State can score relentlessly against Purdue at 70%. Can you mute that person, please?
Name.
The person that's copying and pasting the same thing over and over again. Yeah. It's almost Melissa G doesn't win a lot of I don't care what that was. All right. So, yeah, it would only be Purdue, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about this game.
Yeah, I end up taking just Ohio State first half team total over 27.5. Just because, naturally I'd want to kind of fade the coming off the big game, but Ohio State's offense has been kind of struggling. They need that get right spot, if you want to call it. It's like a momentum builder. I think it's a Purdue team where you can kind of just walk all over. 115th in defensive success rate, 128th in EPA margin on defense there. And what's kind of, I guess you want to call it funny about this Purdue side is they're bad both on against the pass and against the run. So, like, if Ohio State just wants to hand the ball to Travion Henderson and Quinshon Dunkins, boom, great. If they want to throw the ball to Mbuka, Smith, and Tate, like, they have the go. This is actually a bet I talked about a little bit on another show. I think it was on the NBC show. G. Scott would be a funny touchdown scorer today. I think he's going to get in the end zone. It's like plus 300.
G. Scott, who's that?
The tight end for Ohio State. He's been getting more and more involved. And so,
okay, well, now I got to look it up.
What was the team total for Ohio State?
27.5 in the first half, minus 105.
Okay, 27.5 in the first half. Okay.
Let's see if we have touchdown scores here. Touchdown. I gotta see. Player touchdowns. It's loading up. You said G. Scott.
Yeah.
That's a deep cut right there. G. Scott Jr. plus 370 on FanDuel.
Crazy.
There you go. G. Scott Jr.
It's not like something you go put your mortgage on, but like worth like $5, go get a Big Mac afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, and what you said about Purdue, spot on. It's okay. So maybe this isn't the most exciting game for Ohio State, but that defensive front is so weak that Ohio State could come out and let's just hand the ball off a bunch of times, beat the hell out of them, and they could do it at 80%. So yeah, it's tough. Not to mention Hudson Card. Hey, he had a couple nice games recently, but
Yeah. The only way that I could get to Purdue is because the way that they play, they're 134th in pace. That's dead last. Maybe they just make the game a crawl, make it so boring and horrible that Ohio State just doesn't get the opportunities to score that much. But at the same time, that probably just results in a lot of Purdue punts and good field position for Ohio State. So, like, it really probably doesn't even help that much. They'd have to play nearly perfect to keep this within 4 touchdowns. So I would lean Ohio State because I think they can just do whatever they want here. So that was the only case that I could make for Purdue.
All right, let's move on to the next game. Next game is Miami, Georgia Tech. It looks like Haynes King is going to play. I don't know if that's been 100% confirmed, but I read that they named him captain for the game, which is indicative of him playing. And to be honest, this one comes down to what you think about explosive plays, because if you look at Miami's defense, if you just look at their schedule and look at the amount of points they've given up in some of their games recently, you might think this defense is terrible. The efficiency numbers don't look all that bad. Yeah. Giving up a lot of explosive plays, and I kind of have mixed feelings on that. Sometimes, on one hand, you could say, hey, explosive plays just happen, and if you're playing consistent, good defense, I'll disregard explosive plays as outliers. But at the same time, we're seeing the behavior repeat over and over again, where Miami's defense continues to give up these big plays. So if Haynes King is playing, I wish I had any sort of status update. Because if I'm taking, you can put Georgia Tech up for me. I didn't bet it. If I'm actually putting money on Georgia Tech, it's not just I need Haynes King in there. I need to know that he's 100%. And obviously, there's no way we're going to know that information. If Haynes King wasn't injured and coming into this game, I'd be down to take a stab here at the plus 10.5. But with our current situation, it's just Georgia Tech or pass.
I went with Miami minus 10. It's still available now, actually. What's funny about this Haynes King situation is I handicapped it with Haynes King in. I thought that was the only appropriate way to do it. If Haynes King ends up being out, more power to you. Pete Thamel said about 15 minutes ago that he's a true game time decision. And they're not even going to go to the backup. The backup who can actually sling the ball a little bit. They're going to go to the freshman who I know absolutely nothing about, which kind of worries me a little bit. But it's about keeping up for me, right? Like Georgia Tech, they hang their hat defensively, stopping the run. Well, we know Miami's not going to run the ball. They throw the ball the second most in college football. And of course, they have Cam Ward, who's super explosive. Georgia Tech, 105th in EP and success rate to the drop back. So I think that it could be like a similar situation that we've seen in a lot of these Miami games, where the game's pretty close and then Miami just continuously pulls away because their offense is kind of built different, I guess you'd say. I like Restrepo 100 plus receiving yards. It's like a big price, like plus 280 or something. That's just a little fun bet I threw in. I didn't put a lot on it, but I thought he's had like 5 games over 100. In this game, Georgia Tech is probably one of the better offenses in terms of keeping up with the opposition that they've played so far. So it could be a really nice shootout. Weather's good too. Yeah,
the weather's good too. Yep. Georgia Tech has played some better defense recently. If you look at their last 4 games, last 5 games, they actually have some nice defensive numbers. But I mean, stopping drones in Virginia Tech, stopping Riley Leonard in Notre Dame, slightly different than this Miami team. This is a little bit of a different conversation. So this Miami offense, I kind of have it. It doesn't matter who they play. They're just going to score. So even though Georgia Tech has been playing some good defense, can you really count on them to make stops against Cam Ward in this offense? I'd say probably not. But Andy?
So somebody in the comments said that Miami's coming off a bye week. They're not. They're not. They played Duke last week. And I will say this about that game. If anybody that watched it, I was very excited because early on I had Miami minus 21 and they went up 21-0 or 21-3. And I was like, oh, this is going to be easy cover. And then they were trailing, and then they still wound up covering after trailing late in the third quarter. It was the weirdest football game I've watched in a while. And that's just kind of been the way Miami's played this year. They don't get the respect. I don't think they're getting the respect of like being one of the top, 1 or 2 teams in the country, even though like the stats on offense tell you this team probably should be considered 1 or 2 in the country. But their defense has been so lackluster, giving up big plays, like Kyle said. I don't necessarily think they have to worry about that here. I don't think Georgia Tech's a big play team like this. That's not how they want to.
Whoa.
That's not who they are. And also with a quarterback that's injured who's going to be under pressure, because as bad as Miami's secondary's been, they can get to the quarterback. And the Georgia Tech O-line hasn't been that great this year. So if he's under pressure while also not 100%, that really worries me. So it's down to 9.5 now in some places. So as long as it's within 2 touchdowns, I think I'd take Miami. I think somebody also mentioned in the comments, this is the revenge game for Miami. Last year, this is the game where Cristobal could have taken the knee. He didn't do it because he's an idiot, and they lost. This is a big revenge game, and obviously Miami remembers that because that one probably Cristobal's been thinking about that every night for probably a year now. So yeah, I think that's part of it as well.
I don't know if you guys want to bring up the history in this rivalry though. Georgia Tech 5-1 against the number in their last 6 against Miami. Miami can't cover. You know what I'm surprised at? I didn't bet this game, so I can't pound the podium and say Georgia Tech. I did consider it. I'm surprised that we're polling at 70% Miami, 21% Georgia Tech. I thought this was more of a split. Now, not that the 1,000 people watching right now are it's an accurate sample of the entire betting community, but I'm surprised because Miami's been playing these close games. They've been giving up these big plays. Maybe I'll sprinkle. All right, next game, Florida, Texas. And the way I feel about this game, based on what we've seen the last few weeks, this number's way too high. Florida's playing well right now. The defense is looking way better than we expected. The offense is looking good. Here's the problem. Here's why it would only be Texas for me here. If Aiden Warner's playing quarterback, there's just nothing. I want nothing to do with Florida. Did you guys see his stat line in the Georgia game? What was he, like 7 of 24 or something?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
7 of 20, I think something like that. 21, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and this Texas team, if you want to poke holes in the Texas offense with Quinn Ewers and tell me that Texas offensively is overrated based on the easy competition they saw early in the season, I'm on board. I'll agree with you there. But when it comes to the Texas defense, I'm a believer. I think this is a top 5, top 10 defense at the very least. So Aiden Warner on the road in Texas is crazy. If he's starting, and from what I'm reading, it sounds like he probably is, right? Is that what you guys are?
Yeah, they said if Lagway plays, it's gonna be an insignificant amount.
Right, and it's almost like Florida. You announced that Napier's coming back next year. You got your quarterback for the future, or at least you believe you do. What's the point of going? What are we doing? Yeah. I wouldn't risk his injury, so I don't think Lagway's going to play. And like I said, if Aiden Warner's playing quarterback in this game on the road in Texas, I could see Florida's offense gifting Texas a touchdown or two here. So even if you like what you're seeing from the Florida defense and you're not a believer in the Texas offense, which, by the way, completely could see the logic behind that, I think Texas can cover this -21.5 with a mediocre offensive day because I could see them being gifted points. So it's only Texas for me here.
Yeah, I went with Florida team total under 13.5. They struggled to move the ball. Warner can't throw the ball. And I actually just think they're going to play it a lot slower, right? Like, this is one of those games they find the end zone twice. You pat them on the back. Texas, I also think I feel has been kind of disrespected, like since the Georgia game. A lot of teams are just like, yeah, Texas sucks all of a sudden now, right? Like that's like the notion. But no, this is still a really good defensive unit. I feel bad for Florida because I actually was one who was, I would say, like more down on the Gators to start the season than I probably should have been. But a quality side, getting better, improving, but just the quarterback situation's really, really, really bad.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I think I'm pretty sure my YouTube video I uploaded last night, I said Texas -21 or Florida team total under. I think I said those exact words. So I'm in complete agreement. What about Moose?
So I will say this: Aiden Warner was really, really bad. He's a transfer from Yale. Getting stuck in this situation does suck. The fact that they're down to their third string quarterback, I will say that sucks for Billy Napier. I'm fascinated by this just athletic department right now. This week they did announce that they were keeping Napier, but I don't think it's because of success on the field or expectations or recruits or anything. I just think that there's a lot going on there right now in that school period. That's not a conversation for now. In terms of this game, they're not only are they coming off a game, they probably should have beat Georgia. I mean, if Lagway stays in, I as a Georgia fan, I know for sure my confidence was not high when he was in the game. When he came out, certainly felt great. But going into this one, you not only have that aspect where they're down to their third string quarterback, they just lost to their biggest rival, and now going on the road to a team that the last time we saw them, they played Vanderbilt, but before that, it was the game against Georgia. That was a similar to the Alabama game for Georgia. They both teams hyped it up amazingly. It was supposed to be such a big game. They just got punched in the mouth, but it wasn't because of their defense. They had 2 interceptions against Carson Beck. Their defense looked good. It was the offense that couldn't do anything. So, I think that Florida's not only going to have trouble scoring. I just think Texas is going to be able to do pretty much whatever they want in this game against them.
By the way, it looks like in the last 10 minutes, I'm seeing Georgia Tech 9.5, 9 now. Yep. So it looks like they may have announced Haynes King is in. Next up, either of you guys want to go first? Are we on Minnesota Rutgers? Yeah, Scoop's at this game, by the way, guys. Scoop's probably in the parking lot right now. Yeah. So Scoop's here. Monungai just got ruled out, I think, late last night, this morning for Rutgers. Yep. That's their main running back. Look, I said on YouTube, I'm not even legally allowed to bet this game, even if I wanted to. But this sounds crazy. I don't think it's a terrible spot for Callie McManus to make some throws. I think the Minnesota pass defense is a little bit overrated. They racked up some elite stats against some bad teams earlier in the season. We have seen teams throw the ball on Minnesota here and there. I mean, I think it might be time to sell on Minnesota. Last week they could. I mean, it looks like they beat Illinois handedly. What was it? They won by 8. Wasn't really the case. I mean, Illinois had the ball to tie the game on like the 11 at the end, or threw an interception. I forget exactly what happened. I was pissed because I had Illinois +3. I know that. But I forget exactly how it ended. But it was a lot closer game than the final score indicates. So I think this is a little extreme. The 6.5, 6, or it looks like 5.5 now. I get the Rutgers looks like shit. It's tough to trust them. I would go Rutgers or over here. Not betting this game. Couldn't bet this game even if I wanted to.
I already bet Minnesota because I had this with Monungai in as Minnesota -6. And even if he's worth 1 point, which probably is to this offense, maybe 1.5, still getting a little bit of value there. Minnesota, I think, should be able to effectively shut this team down defensively, but more so like this is not your typical Greg Schiano defense. And more so they stink against the run. Like that's what Minnesota wants to do, is they just want to run the ball. And unfortunately, I don't think they're like, it's not even a matter of just keeping up. I just think their offense is going to be so stagnant against a PJ Fleck led team that's like getting more confidence. They're another one of those teams that, high energy when they're going really well, when things are going really well, and defensively they're starting to lock in. So I took Minnesota -6.
Yeah, I mean, Rutgers, we were all really excited in New Jersey for this year for Rutgers, and losing, what was his name? Mohamed Torre, right, Andy? Yeah. Losing Mohamed Torre right before the season. That's our main linebacker, defensive captain. That's our best player. I say "our" as if I'm this big Rutgers supporter. But that was the best defensive player Rutgers had. Lost him for the year right before the season, and the defense just never really showed up. A guy like that, the defensive captain, the guy that's going to have 120 tackles, that's a huge piece. Look at NC State's defense in the beginning of the year. They looked terrible after losing Peyton Wilson to the Steelers. So yeah, like your main guy on defense, the whole unit just takes a hit, and Rutgers just never really covered defensively. And even though Minnesota's been struggling to run the ball as of late, that's what I'm scared of, is this could be the game where where the run game just starts looking fluent out of nowhere. And I do think Brosmer can throw a pick or two, though.
Yeah, that was kind of an omen for the season that Rutgers was going to have, because now their entire defense is pretty much gone, and now they don't have Monungai. They've been ravaged by injuries, but I also had, I can't bet it, but I also had Minnesota before I even knew Monungai wasn't playing. I think Minnesota, I know that they theoretically want to they want to throw the ball, but I do know they have a good running back, and Rutgers also can't stop the run. So I do think that the running game for Minnesota might carry them here and be able to just win this game comfortably. I don't think that Rutgers will be able to do anything on offense. I'm a little nervous about the revenge game factor for Khalid Manis. I used to not care about those things, but Sawyer Robertson going to Lubbock kind of just changed my perspective.
I tried telling you, Andy.
These are college kids that is in their head, so like that could be a thing, but I just think that he doesn't have enough talent around him right now to keep this one close. I will say, last week I think I had Illinois, and I thought we were good on that. I thought we were going to cover that one, and then late in the game they made like or Illinois turned the ball over or whatever, and it was tough. But Minnesota's playing good football now, so yeah, it's just two teams again going in different directions here.
You know what I think this game's going to look like? It's going to look like the Washington game at Piscataway, where Washington's the significantly better team start to finish. bad penalties, weird plays where Rutgers somehow is in the game and covers this, and people are going to claim the New Jersey Mafia rigged it because that's what happens. That's what I think is going to happen, is people are going to say that's what you're going to say. That's what happened during the Washington game. People in the Discord were pissed that were on Washington. They're like, dude, I'm never betting on a game in New Jersey again. Syracuse, Boston College. So I talked about this one on YouTube last night. I do think this is a bet worth placing. I didn't actually place it. It just sounds crazy with these two teams. I kind of think it stays under the total here. And I know, dude, it sucks even considering an under with Syracuse because they drop back to pass so goddamn much here. Yeah. But I like the way this Boston College defense plays at home. I think you can find a little bit of value on them because their defense as a whole, you look at their numbers, looks like a pretty disappointing season for the Boston College defense. But if you isolate it to just their home games, they got lit up by, I think it was Louisville. But as a whole, they've been a much better defense at home here. Syracuse, I mean, it's just McCord. Can he not turn the ball over? I do think Boston College is able to keep Syracuse from ripping them to shreds. And on the other side, I think Syracuse defense is a little bit underrated. They've actually been pretty strong against the run. They're not a good defense by any means, but I think they're a little bit better of a defense than they get credit for. Boston College hasn't been able to run the ball all year. Their entire offense is on the shoulders of Castellanos. Can he make the big plays or can he? With McCord and Castellanos, those are such like boomer bust quarterbacks where they're going to score 50 or they're going to score 0. So the idea of taking an under with those two quarterbacks is kind of crazy, but I do think we're going to see a lower scoring game here. So under, didn't bet this one.
I went with Cuse plus the 2.5 there. Boston College on a pretty bad run, and most of that run is dealing with quarterbacks who are just carving them up, right? Like the loss to Virginia, McCondelara, when he threw for like 179, but he was super efficient in that game. They got tore up on the ground against Virginia Tech, which was insane, right? Like drones didn't even need to play well, just tore them up on the ground. And now then they go play against Louisville, and Ja'Cory Brooks had like 100, I think like 5 or 6 yards. Could say Amari Jackson being out obviously is like, that stinks, right? Like when you're already a pretty bad pass defense, then one of your most effective corners goes down. I went with Syracuse. The wind is about 16 miles per hour in this game. I hope it doesn't get higher, which does affect Syracuse, who throw the ball the fourth most in college football. But I think this is going to be one of those situations where it just keeps going kind of sideways for this Bill O'Brien-led team.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the Virginia Tech game, because some people may look at the Virginia Tech game and think that's where I think you could find some value on the Syracuse defense. People are just looking at that game because it was last week. Virginia Tech ran the ball all over Syracuse. The 3 games before that game was at home. The 3 games before that were all on the road. So Syracuse played 3 consecutive road games against UNLV, NC State, and Pitt. They actually played solid defense against the run in all 3 of them. So people are going to look at last game and be like, this Syracuse defense terrible against the run. I actually think there's some value. I think they are able to stop a Boston College rushing attack that's been really underwhelming this year. They haven't been able to run the ball. So, yeah, I agree that I think Syracuse defensive front will look pretty good here.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I do think that they're going to stop the run, and Boston College is going to struggle offensively. On the other side, Kyle McCord's issue has obviously been he's turning the ball over too much, and he's been but a lot of that's been under pressure. He's not going to be under pressure really in this one. That's not what BC. They don't have really a pass rush that can compete in this game. So if he's not under pressure and he can just step back and throw, he might still make a dumb throw every once in a while, but he most of the time has been able to be at least solid when he's got a clean pocket. So I think he'll be able to get some things done through the air. And I don't think BC's offense can keep up. Both of these teams had opposite weeks last week. BC went up big on Louisville, blew it. They still cut. I will give them that. And then Syracuse went down like 21-0 against Virginia Tech and came back and somehow won. And I was pissed because I had Virginia Tech in that game. They really didn't deserve that. Virginia Tech blew that one. But nonetheless, these teams are coming off opposite weeks, different vibes in both locker rooms. Also, I think Syracuse can clinch not a playoff spot, a bowl game with a win, I think. So that would be big for them. But yeah, I would take Syracuse here.
All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, so the next one, Brad, am I crazy for wanting to take South Florida here? We were just actually talking about this one before we went live. I don't know if it's because of what happened with Air Force last season that it's in my head, but if this is your first year following college football, you probably think Army and Navy, excellent teams, right? You wouldn't be wrong. They look great. Last year, Air Force, I believe, was 9-0. First place in the Mountain West Conference, was looking unbeatable. Then the last 3 games of the season, they looked like absolute death. They were getting blown out. And I mean, I'm talking about getting blown out in games where they were laying 16.5 points. So there was just a turnaround where Air Force was looking so unbeatable, and then they looked so terrible the last month of the year. And I don't know if I just can't get that out of my head, but I kind of have that when I look at this Navy team, more so this Navy team than the Army team. The Army team has made me a little more of a believer. But when I'm looking at this Navy team, that's what I'm seeing. I kind of think they're going to look completely different down the stretch, but I don't really have any logical reasoning for thinking that. So I'm thinking maybe I'm just being a little biased based on what happened last year. I kind of want to bet South Florida here.
I kind of lean South Florida in this one. I would understand if you want to take Navy. Like, it makes total sense to me. But just the matchup, this is probably one of the tougher matchups for Navy. South Florida, where they excel is against the run. They're like 45th in the country against the run, which might seem like a small number. Like, they're not really good, but like they're like the hundredths in their pass D. I remember they held the Alabama team pretty well against the run. Horvat hasn't been playing all that great either over the last 2 weeks. Granted, he did play Notre Dame. Like, that's just like not an easy game. But for me, actually, he was out for the Notre Dame game, I believe. But for me, I passing, but I just think it's just a pretty bad matchup for Navy if you want to be pro Navy.
Moose?
I'm on the under. I have an under graphic in there. Not only do I think USF has been really good against the run, which is obviously what Navy wants to do. It's a different type of running style, but it is nonetheless the run. I don't trust this USF offense at all. It has been a disaster this year. I thought it was going to be so great. It had injuries, but it just overall, it's been pretty crappy no matter who's been in there. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause for the South Florida defense is the last 3 weeks, they've played 3 teams that just want to throw the ball. The last time they played a rushing attack was like a month ago when it was Tulane. They did perform well in that game, but again, when you follow that up with playing FAU, they're more of a balanced team, but then you play Memphis and UAB. They're both top 20 in pass frequency. So I don't know how much of the success is actually success compared to what they're facing, but nonetheless, I think Navy's kind of had that little hitch in the road against Notre Dame, and it kind of dragged them to the point they are now. So I just think both teams are going to struggle to score. Both defenses are going to show up, and yeah, I think this is going to be an under game. 57, and I think it is 56.5. That's a bit of a high number. So,
all right, next game. West Virginia, Cincinnati. I do have a bet in this game. It's the over. I think it's come down a little bit, though, so I think the market may have moved slightly against me. Oh, wait. Well, I got 55.5. I think you can get 55 or 54.5 now, so it hasn't moved dramatically. Yeah, I don't really know where the stops are coming from here on either side. Cincinnati, not a strong run defense. West Virginia, we know, can run the shit out of the ball. I guess maybe there's some concern that there's a backup quarterback starting for West Virginia, but last week, I mean, he had last week. What's his name? What's the backup quarterback? I forget his name.
Marcolai?
Yeah, Marcolai or something.
Yeah, like that.
So last week, his game was he had a better game than any FBS game that Garrett Green has played this year, passer rating wise. He had like a 188 passer rating. Garrett Green in the FBS games hadn't come close to that. So is it crazy to think that this quarterback might be better than Garrett Green? It's not like Garrett Green's an All-American or anything. I think he might be better. West Virginia should be able to run the ball in Cincinnati. I also trust this backup quarterback to make some throws because he showed us he can. And then on the other side, West Virginia's secondary. Oh, no, I'm on the over. West Virginia's secondary is a crime scene. They can't stop anybody from throwing the ball. Anybody. And then on the road at Cincinnati against a passing attack that's been surprisingly good with Sorsby. Cincinnati might have a top 25 passing attack. It's crazy as that sounds. They really might be in that discussion of having a top 25 passing attack. So this West Virginia secondary hasn't been able to stop anybody through the air. Jalen Daniels, you name it. Whoever plays West Virginia, the quarterback has a great day. So I expect Cincinnati to be able to score points as well. When I first looked at this game, it was 5.5. Then it was 4.5. Now it looks like this line's down to 3.5. We're getting close to the territory where I might say there's also some value on Cincinnati. I mean, if you can get an even 3, I'd say play Cincinnati as well. But as of right now, the bet I have down is the over. If it hits 3, though, I'm not opposed to jumping on Cincinnati at an even 3.
Yeah, when Cincinnati got to, I believe it was 4, I just threw them in a parlay on their money line there. Can't trust West Virginia. The secondary is bad, 114th in the country. Like you said, Sorsby's been all right. And then for me, it's like the issues with the running backs, right? Like Jaheim White was banged up like a couple weeks ago, and then Donaldson gets banged up. Now you have your 2 primary backs who are kind of banged up. I normally wouldn't care as much, but I know they're going to want to run the ball at a pretty high clip. They are 111th in rush rate over expected, basically meaning they pass the ball. I mean, they run the ball at an insane amount. So for me, I thought Cincinnati would kind of, get to play this game at home, get to play against a banged up team, be able to throw the ball with some effectiveness. But I just couldn't I had trouble laying points with Cincinnati. So that might tell you my confidence in this game, right? Like I couldn't get there with laying the points. That's normally a bad sign.
Yeah, I mean, I do think West Virginia can score even with the injury. So I'd be hesitant to lay more than a field goal myself.
Yeah.
Andy?
I don't know how many times we see this where you'll have a quarterback that has like a crazy. I think we have 2 Big 12 games today where we're kind of like tossing back and forth whether the quarterback can like do what they did last week. I think the UCF quarterback and the West Virginia quarterback, I don't know. Was that actually how good they are, or were they just in fortunate spots? You weren't prepared for them. I don't know if defenses really know them yet. So I would lean Cincinnati because I don't think the quarterback can do what he did last week. But also, West Virginia has proven time and time again that any quarterback, like he said, any quarter, doesn't matter who it is going to throw on them. And now you have a guy who, prior to the Colorado game, was pretty much having good weeks every week. I know the yards per attempt went down in the middle of the season, but the success rates are all there. This is a really good passing offense for Cincinnati. Other than the Colorado game, they've been really, really good in terms of throwing the ball. So I just think that's going to be tough for West Virginia to keep up with if they even have a slow start in this one.
All right, let's move on to the next game, which is 9 Windiana. Oh, you're calling them 10 Windiana now?
MINN.
You know what's funny is when we were talking about that before the season, like people are calling them 9 Windiana. We were like laughing about it. Like, that's hilarious. Well, they're 9-0. So 9 Windiana has come to fruition here. And judging by what we're looking at, probably going to be 10-0. Yeah. You guys want to talk about this one?
Yeah, I'm down to take this because I took Indiana -14. It's funny because there's no way, like I don't even know if I was like being 100% serious when I took Indiana win the Big Ten. Like I think I was just like, this will be like make good playback on social media. And I took them at like 40 or 50 to 1, and that was now it's down to 10 to 1. But like, I don't know if it's the bets that's growing on me or this team is growing on me, but every time I watch them play, there's something that I see that I like a little bit different. And something that stood out to me the last couple of times watching them play was how well they've been against the run. They've been a pretty strong team against the run, against Michigan, who really going to want to run the ball every play, right? That just naturally makes me want to say, well, is there any value in taking Indiana? Well, the good thing about this Indiana team is they just keep going, right? Curtis Rourke, the transfer from Ohio, was a great fit for this team. He helps them keep going. Justice Ellison, good running back. But what I liked seeing last week, I obviously don't like seeing players not have good success, but Ellison wasn't having a ton of success last week. They still found a way to move the ball down the field, and they still found a way to eventually win in considerable fashion. I think they're first in offensive success rate in the country, which and for the past, which is like crazy to think. Like you have Cam Ward for Miami and Dylan Gabriel, who are like just throwing the ball with like crazy success, and then you have Curtis Rourke and this Kurt Signetti led team that's doing the same. Will Johnson is also out for Michigan, their best defensive player, the cornerback there, which is another huge blow. I think you'll see this team be able to move the ball on Michigan. But fun fact, if anybody's into trends, they've only beaten Michigan one time since the 80s. So like that's something to talk about. But you know, Kirk, what?
Wasn't it the COVID year too? Didn't they beat?
Yeah, it was COVID year.
Yeah.
But you know, Kirk Signetti, right? Like he's Mr. Media guy. He's Mr. Media guy. Like he's the guy who says all the sayings. You know, he's talking about that, right? Like, oh, they're counting us out because we've only beat them once in 25 years. I really like Indiana. I like this Indiana team. I did take them plus 10.5 against Ohio State. I think it's down to 9.5. I wouldn't go past the 10, but if you find some 10s out there, grab it up.
Yeah, and what you said about Indiana's run defense, the question was, because Signetti at James Madison last year, they had an insanely good run defense. They were first in the country in yards per carry allowed. They allowed like 2.1 yards per carry on the season last year at James Madison, an elite run defense. And the question was, does that translate over to the Big Ten? Because they brought some of their pieces with, I believe 4 of the 7 defensive front starters in Indiana are from James Madison. I think it's 4 out of 7. So they brought that same elite run defense from James Madison to Indiana. And that was the question. Is that going to translate? Does that work in the Big Ten? And the answer is looking like a resounding yes, because the run defense is elite. Like you said, how is Michigan going to run the ball? I will say, if you're looking to get to Michigan, which put up Indiana for me as well, if you are looking to get to Michigan, you can say Davis Warren seems to be developing a little bit as a passer. We've seen him make some throws. So Indiana, if you had to poke a hole in the defense, you could say, hey, you could throw the ball on this team. I think that's fair. But that's crazy to try to keep up with Curtis Rourke in this offense with Davis Warren throwing the ball. That's just hilarious. So, yeah, it's only going to be Indiana for me. Moose?
Yeah, Indiana. Michigan's, I don't like calling people frauds, but they are about that. The idea that Michigan has a good pass defense or defense overall, I know that they're missing their best corner, but I mean, he hasn't been playing for a couple of weeks now. So, like, that's just who you are at this point, right? You just don't have him. They have seen 3 of the last 4 games. They've seen Will Rogers, they've seen Aiden Childs, and they've seen Dylan Gabriel. All of them have torn them to pieces. And I would put Curtis Rourke with those guys. Curtis Rourke, I mean, as much as like I think all those guys are better than Curtis Rourke, they don't have the season that Curtis Rourke has had besides Dylan Gabriel. So like, you have to put him with those guys. So what is there that tells me he's not going to do the exact same thing that those guys did? And it wasn't successful for Childs, but he didn't have a running game with him. I think Indiana's got some semblance of a running game compared to Michigan State. So I just think this is an overload. This is the same line that Oregon was favored by last week, and that was in Eugene. I think the same thing's going to happen. Maybe not in the exact same way, because Oregon probably shouldn't have covered that game. That was kind of stupid. But I think Indiana just, when they want to beat the crap out of you, they're going to do it because they need to at this point, because seemingly nobody respects them in the national conversation yet. And they're 9-0 and they're in the Big Ten. I don't know how it works that way, but that's just been the way it is. So a win against Michigan, and a comfortable win against Michigan, would probably do that. And I'm not worried about any look aheads or anything, because they've pretty much been looking ahead for 6 weeks now. So I really don't worry about any of that. So yeah, give me Indiana. I think they win this one big.
Next. So this next one, I'm on the over. I got it at 50.5. I think it's at 51.5 now. Yeah, I don't even think you guys need me to say why I think Iowa State will score on Kansas. That seems pretty straightforward. Kansas defense isn't good. Do you need more than that? I mean, the defense isn't very good. I think Iowa State can both run the ball and throw the ball on Kansas. Rocco Beck's coming off, or he had that bad game against UCF. But other than that, we've seen him play really well. Not to mention, he played really well last year. So Rocco Beck, even if he's going through a little bit of a rough patch, he's still a guy I trust against a Kansas secondary that has proven to us time and time again you can beat them. I mean, so yeah, I expect Iowa State to score points here. And on the other side, Iowa State, great defense. their numbers are pretty. It's pretty clearly you can't throw the ball on Iowa State, but you can run the ball on them. I think they're 101st in the country in yards per carry allowed, like 77th in rushing success rate or something like that. They've struggled to defend the run. And in case you've never watched Kansas play before, they want to run the ball. They want to use Jalen Daniels as a passer second. And they should be able to do that. They should be able to run the ball, especially at home against this Iowa State defensive front that has been vulnerable to the run. So I expect Kansas to be able to move the chains as well. Not to mention Jalen Daniels playing much better football recently than he was earlier in the season. So I don't even think it's crazy that Jalen Daniels throws a couple touchdowns here. This number just feels too low to me. I took it at 50.5. This seems like a shootout brewing. So yeah, I'm on the over.
I couldn't figure this game out. I kind of leaned Rocco Beck's passing over. Didn't get quite to the window just because I don't have a good sense of the game flow. But if you say that you like the over, it kind of makes me like Beck's passing over. He's one of the most efficient quarterbacks of throwing the ball deep, which is always nice when you take a guy's over. But the last time I took his over, he played against UCF and shit the bed. So, so I don't have the memory of a goldfish there.
All right, so Rocco Beck's over or pass, Andy?
I would be on Kansas as well. I'm a little weary of it because obviously Iowa State's coming off getting upset, so that's sometimes.
Wait, you said you would be on Kansas as well. No one's on Kansas.
All right, my bad. I forgot you're on the over. My bad. I'm on Kansas. Yeah. The only thing that worries me is that they're coming off the upset, but they're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to do all that. Also, Iowa State, one of the things that Daniel struggled with early in the season was he was getting pressured. I know that Illinois game, they were on him the whole game, which was weird because we thought Kansas was going to have like a sick O-line, and they do now. But early in the season, they were struggling on the O-line. He was under pressure, and he was throwing terrible interceptions. Now that their O-line's playing well, he's pretty much protected the ball pretty well. I'm not saying he's going to throw on Iowa State. Nobody's really been able to do that. But I do think it's a spot where if they have a really good running game and Iowa State has to focus on stopping the run, maybe a few passes could open up for him. So there's always that. So I think a lot of signs point to Kansas, and also at home being dogs, I think that they can win the game outright. So.
Next. I'm taking Kansas as well. All right, Army, North Texas. Andy, what are your thoughts? Oh, this line's up to 6.5, right?
Yeah, the daily getting put in, really. I mean, I hate to go against the troops here. I'm on North Texas, and a lot of this is because I know they have a bye next week, but this would be so Army. It would be so group of five to lose this one. They haven't faced a pass attack near what they're about to face today. It's all North Texas can do. They can't run the ball. They only want to throw the ball. I think they've thrown for like 350 plus in like the last 4 games or so. Like, it's been sick passing numbers, and Army hasn't faced that this year. The only thing that scares me is now that Daly's back, North Texas is getting in all these shootouts, and it's going to be weird because like that's not Army's game necessarily. Army just wants to run the ball and basically tell you stop it. Stop our run, and you can probably beat us. I don't think North Texas could do that, but I'm going to lean North Texas at pretty much a touchdown now because it's such a look-ahead situation. They have Notre Dame in 2 weeks, and that's their season. They beat Notre Dame. They're probably going to the playoff, which is surprising to me, but like it's a look ahead of all look-aheads, and it's also not the greatest matchup because Chandler Morris has been really, really good this year. So I'm on North Texas. The passing game's gonna confuse Army, I will say.
Go ahead.
I took Army, and we talked a little bit about this offline. If there is an area where you kind of can poke holes at this North Texas team, it's going to be against the run. And Bryson Daly getting back in was definitely he's a quarterback for this team. We've seen it, who's worth 3 to 5 points. Like, he is the beat that drums for this team. And I'm totally fine with taking the -6 there. Great season for North Texas. I came on your show, gave out their team total. And if I lose the spread, they better win the doggone game so I can at least cash the North Texas team total this week.
Yeah, I have nothing for this game. I kind of want to take North Texas now that it's back up here. But at the same time, I can't make a reasonable case for Northwestern's defense getting off the field. So it's kind of hard to fade Army when you think they're going to move the chains religiously. So it's just a pass for me. Next up, Clemson, Virginia Tech. I have a bet in this game. So I am on Clemson team total under 30.5. I know Clemson's offense has looked insane for a lot of this season, but it seems like when they play good defenses, they don't look quite as insane. We pull up their schedule. Against Georgia, 3 points. At Florida State, just 29 points. That's Florida State, where their offense was just gifting them whatever, too. Louisville, 21 points. So when they've seen better defenses, the offense hasn't looked nearly as explosive. But also, it's the environment they're going to be in here. And Blacksburg's going to be crazy for this game. So yeah, I don't know if I necessarily like Virginia Tech to move the ball on Clemson's defense, because I think Clemson's defense is very undervalued based on the fact that they gave up a lot of yards and a lot of points in garbage time of games this year. So you look at their defense and they'll be like, oh, they're 27th in success rate per rush, or 29th in success rate per pass. And it's like Virginia scored 2 touchdowns on them in garbage time. App State scored 20 points on them in garbage time. NC State scored 28 points on them in garbage time. So if you take all the production that Clemson's defense has allowed this year defensively, such a huge chunk of that was in garbage time of games. So I think Clemson's defense is really undervalued, but Clemson's offense has definitely shown us that when they see these better units, you can't count on them to be that machine. And on the road in front of this crowd, this place is going to be going freaking crazy. This defense, Virginia Tech, it's not the best defense in the world, but they have probably a top 10 pass rush. That kid is probably the best edge rusher in the NFL draft. You're going to hear his name, you're going to hear his name, and I can't even remember his name. One sec. Let me get his freaking name.
It's a name to remember, folks.
It's a name to remember. It's a name to remember. His name is Powell Ryland. You're going to hear that name. 12.5 sacks. Virginia Tech, top 10 pass rush in front of this crowd. Klubnik's going to be in prison. I didn't feel comfortable enough to take the points with Virginia Tech because I don't love the matchup for drones in the offense, but I feel comfortable going right here. Clemson's not getting over 30 points in this game.
Wow. Not getting over 30. I mean, I don't hate it, right? Like, I actually don't mind it at all. It's just, I feel like that's a pretty sharp cap to go with when you have the team who passes the most in the college football, who plays at a really high pace. You said Virginia Tech, this is going to be a really, really difficult, a difficult place to play. Virginia Tech, pretty solid defensively too. I think severely underrated. You know, before the Virginia Tech game against Syracuse, I said something along the lines of, wow, I can't believe McCord's number is this low. Lowest it had been since week 2. They pretty much shut McCord down, like, and not saying that these two are at all the same quarterback in him and Klubnik, but McCord was one of the leaders in EPA of deep passes, one of the leaders in passes to 10 to 15 in EPA, and he was pretty terrible. Which is, you should put your hats off to the pass rush getting home, making life difficult, but also the secondary holding up. So I think it's a sharp cap. I don't have a bet for this game. I just, I didn't even think about the team total in that situation.
Andy?
I like Clemson a lot here. Obviously, I don't think there's a coach in college football. Well, I'm sure there is, but feeling as much pressure as Dabo right now. I mean, that this is a disaster.
I think you're on the wrong side here, Andy. I think you're underestimating Blacksburg.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Do you understand though? Really?
No, I know Blacksburg's a tough place to play. I get it. Clemson's been in that situation before, though. Like, I don't mind. I don't mind that as much. Like, there's nobody feeling more pressure than Clemson. They should have cakewalked their way to the playoff, and they really screwed it last week. They no-showed last week. It was a disaster. Virginia Tech, as well as they were playing going into last week, they're still making mistakes in these games that you can't make against Clemson. And in terms of like the matchup for Clemson's offense, the splits in coverage are pretty significant, where they're really good at throwing man, and that's all Virginia Tech runs. So like if they're able to throw the ball with Klubnik and get that done quickly, like I don't think that the crowd's gonna have much of an impact here. In terms of like if Clemson had beaten Louisville last week, by the line that they were supposed to. I think this could have been a 2-touchdown line. Like, they're significantly better, significantly more talented than Virginia Tech. I think everyone just has a bad taste in their mouth for what happened last week for Clemson, but they're forgetting the 6 weeks before it, or 7 weeks before it, where Clemson looked like one of the best offenses in college football, or one of the best teams in college football. So I'm not going to just lose everything I thought about Clemson because they no-showed last week. We've seen many teams no-show and then come back and be fine. So, yeah, I understand that's a tough place to play, but I think Clemson can handle it of all teams.
All right. Move on to the next one, which is Duke, NC State. I may be getting cooked on this one. I took Duke. I got plus 3.5, so I got the better number because I think, well, actually, isn't it all? Let me see where it's at now. It's pretty much the same. So it's mostly 3. You can get a plus 3.5 if you look. I am on Duke at plus 3.5. Maybe I'm going to get cooked by NC State here. The recent explosive offense we're seeing from CJ Bailey. Maybe this is just who they are. I personally think it's a perfect time to sell high based on the fact that if you just look at the recent opponents these two teams have played, Duke's playing Miami, SMU, NC State's playing Stanford, Cal, Syracuse, Wake Forest. So the strength of schedule has just been a lot stronger on the Duke side. To be laying more than a field goal seems kind of crazy. Duke's defense we know is official. Yes, they struggled against Miami and SMU. What defense in the country wouldn't struggle against those two offenses? In every other game they've played this year, Duke, the defense has looked official. So I think Duke's defense is going to come into NC State here and give CJ Bailey a wake-up call and give this NC State offense a wake-up call. Be like, oh, shit, maybe we don't have this figured out. We were just beating up on Stanford and Syracuse those defenses. So, yeah, I'm on Duke plus 3.5 here. I think they could win. It's not one of my biggest bets of the day, but at anything more than a field goal, I definitely like Duke. I'm on Duke.
This game was a pass for me. I couldn't get to the window on anything here.
All right. Moose?
I really like Duke. You kind of hit it on the head. You said the strength of schedule. And that significant, the significant part to me is the pass rush because, CJ Bailey's looked really good when he's at a clean pocket. He has had a clean pocket a lot because their O-line looks good on paper, but they have not faced the pass rush that Duke has. Duke has a really good pass rush. They can get to the quarterback very well. And when he's under pressure, and it hasn't been very often yet, really only the Clemson game, which I guess was his debut, he didn't look great. So that's significant that the drop off there. And like you said, Duke is coming off. I mean, this is a breath of fresh air for Duke. They're coming off facing SMU and Miami. That's probably going to be the two teams in the ACC championship game. This is just such a step down for them and a step up for NC State. Like, NC State, they played Stanford last week and they beat the crap out of them. They cruised to that one. Duke had a chance in that game and they had control at one point against Miami on the road. So, like, it is significant that as bad as they lost those two games by the points, they were competing in the Miami game. They didn't compete in the SMU game. They got crushed, but or they competed a little bit, but at the end of the game, it was pretty ugly. But they competed in those games, and NC State hasn't played a close game in a while. So there is a difference there. So I really think that this Duke team can not only keep it close, they're winning this game in my opinion. So Duke.
All right, let's move on to the next one, which is Colorado. Do you guys want to talk about this? I think this is the hardest game to handicap on the board. How do you fade Colorado? But also at the same time, I also think Colorado's defense hasn't really been tested in terms of the pass. And on the road in Lubbock is a hell of a test. Baron Morton always lights it up at home. They're averaging 45 points a game at home, Texas Tech. So how do you lay 4.5 in a game like that? I guess I'm just over a pass, but I'm just listening. I want to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, I didn't have anything for this game. I was going to try to get myself to get to more in passing total, but his total was like 279, which is just a little too high for me. Like that's like a Dylan Gabriel number. Like to put in perspective, that's higher than Carson Beck this week, which is Carson Beck's gonna throw the ball 40 times, right? But it's
the other team's saying
it's hard to like want to be against this Colorado team. A team that, you know, they've gotten better on the offensive line. It was an offensive line that was literally made up of all transfers. And we were kind of like, when is this offensive line going to turn up, right? Like, maybe it's not a good idea to get a bunch of transfers for the most important position group on your team. And it looks like they've gone better. I also think that Shedeur Sanders hasn't been holding the ball as long. This Texas Tech team is like, their secondary is not good. They're not good against the pass. And then you have to go against, Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, like Webster, like a bunch of really good. I think you're talking about Shepard, like a bunch of really good wide receivers. I've gone back and forth on, what I think about this Colorado team as a whole. But if we want to talk about a game where they should be set up for success, this is another one. But you remember, like, we were taking Colorado like plus points. Now it's Colorado as a favorite laying points. It's a big difference. I have to like pass on it though.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably be over. I don't even know, because
overpass is good too.
Because even Colorado's defense is, I don't know. Colorado's got a good defense. I don't freaking even know what to do with this game. I would imagine everyone's betting Colorado at the number. Andy,
I just want to clear something up. I said that SMU Duke wasn't close. That went to overtime. Bad information.
But you're fair that you said that though, because the only reason it was close was because Kevin Jennings kept throwing the ball to Duke.
I wanted to also mention that. That was part of my point. Duke's been playing close games. NC State hasn't. So it actually worked in my favor, but I messed it up. My bad. Don't want to get bad information. I'm a bad guy. Now,
you suck, dude.
I suck. I'm on the over, but I will say I usually don't take 60+ point overs. It's a very high number, but I was looking at the spreadsheet before, and I was looking at all these their past games and everything. I don't think there's either way, either one of them is going to have a bad offensive game. Baron Morton at home, we've talked about it a lot. He's really good at home. Colorado hasn't been stopped by anybody since Nebraska, and that was a long time ago. And I think that was just a little bit too much hype and a little bit too much pass rush. None of those things they really have to worry about here. So I don't like 60-point overs, but how is this not going over is my question for everybody. Like, it has to. So over.
All right, let's move on to the next game. South Carolina, Vandy. I got a bet in this one, too. Ooh. I know South Carolina has put up some decent numbers on the scoreboard, which is why I think I was able to get a number I really like on it. But South Carolina does not have a consistent offense. They've broken some big plays. They've scored a couple defensive touchdowns. So that's why you look at the scoreboard like, oh, they put up 33 in this game, 30 in this one. But their offense does not consistently move the chains. It's an offense reliant on running the ball. Their run game is not consistent. Vanderbilt's done a great job defending the run. I think South Carolina's going to struggle to move the ball in this game. Now, as far as Diego Pavia and the Vanderbilt offense, could be a nightmare situation for them as well. Their offensive line is not very good. They're going to really struggle to run the ball in South Carolina. Pavia is going to be running for his life from this pass rush. But with the team total at 26.5, I'm on South Carolina team total under 26.5. The reason I couldn't take Vandy is, like I said, he's going to be in prison here with this South Carolina pass rush. But one thing Pavia doesn't do is turn the ball over. I think he has an A+ turnover worthy play rate. So maybe he'll take some sacks. Maybe the drives will get stunted and Vanderbilt won't be able to score. But I very seriously doubt Vanderbilt's going to gift South Carolina free points, which is a big part of how they've been scoring a lot of points in these games. Their pass rush just is disruptive, and the defense is able to put them in great positions. And not to mention, Rocket Morris has broken some long runs. I don't think that's going to happen here. Vanderbilt hasn't been getting crushed by these explosive plays. Vanderbilt hasn't been gifting their opponent great field position, giving them free points. So all the mistakes that South Carolina has been capitalizing on, I don't think Vanderbilt's going to make them, especially at home. So instead of taking Vanderbilt plus the points, because I really don't like the matchup for their offense, I want South Carolina team total under 26.5. I also am not mad at a full game under 45.5 as well.
Rocket Sanders, you combine the quarterback and the running back. It's all good. But anyways, I actually
Rocket more. Oh yeah, go on.
I actually lean I lean Vanderbilt here, because like South Carolina first and foremost like has the best two bookends like ever, like right, like in college football. It's really obvious there. But for me, we have to think about this is a Vanderbilt team that is 103rd or 104th in rush rate over expected. They're going to run the ball a ton. I think they're just going to limit the dropbacks, limit in the situations, because this is a South Carolina team who frequently takes their two best players off the field on defense in obvious rush situations, which is more advantageous to Vanderbilt. Also, like, the South Carolina team is not really built to blow teams out. Really like what Vanderbilt's doing here this season. I'm just gonna ride them. It was funny, they were like +7 to Auburn, now +6 at home to South Carolina. Yeah, I'm going Vandy +6.
And before you go, Andy, someone asked, Sauce, do you have any insight on the Louisiana Tech taking Jacksonville State at home? I actually laid the 9.5 in that one. I actually bet that one. Usually on Saturdays, I don't bet a lot of Group of 5 games just because I don't personally have time to look at them all. But I like that one under 10. So I bet Jacksonville State in that one. Andy?
I can't seem to get a Vanderbilt game right this year. They are the stupidest, weirdest team in this.
Stupidest?
They're the stupidest team in this sport. I like it. I like watching them. They're really fun to watch. Although I had Auburn last week, so that wasn't a ton of fun. But they're weird. They seem to get up for big games. They seem to not really care for some of the other ones, although they've really played all close SEC. They pretty much played close games against no matter who they played besides Alcorn. Because even Ball State went in there and played a close game with them. Like, the numbers don't tell you to take Vanderbilt, but I just have to jump on it. So I'm on Vanderbilt. They seem to just play close games with everybody. They have a shot to beat everybody. I don't necessarily get it. They're always negative talent differential compared to their opponent. The numbers always tell you to take the opposite, but I don't know what it is about them. They seem to have a different type of vibe around them with Pavia and the leadership that they have there. So yeah, I'm on Vanderbilt. I will say also a little bit of a letdown for Shane Beamer and South Carolina, because this is coming off a huge win, which was a really good spot for him, but it was a huge win. It was their first win over a top 10 team, I think, in the Beamer era. So it is a letdown spot for South Carolina as well.
I'm a little worried that the market, it seems to be against you guys there on Vandy. It was at 5.5, moved up to 6.5. I would imagine a lot of the quote unquote public action coming in on Vanderbilt. Don't love that, but all right. Next up, Maryland, Oregon. But you know what? The market liked Iowa last night too. UCLA moved up to 6.5. Saw 7s before kickoff, and I was like, what? Maryland, Oregon in Eugene. I heard this might be a weather game, right? There might be some shitty weather here. I think that only helps Oregon, to be honest. I don't even think it hurts them. I don't know what Billy Edwards is going to do here. If Billy Edwards plays the game of his life, maybe they are able to stay in this game. But the way this Maryland team's built, I mean, they're built for Oregon to beat the shit out of them. He's going to go into Eugene and try to drop back and pass on Oregon against that pass rush on the road. It's going to be Billy Edwards is going to be in some serious shit here. He should be seeing a lot of pressure. I don't know how many open receivers he's going to have to even throw to. Don't like the matchup for Maryland offensively at all. Now, I guess you could say Maryland's defensive front is strong, and if the weather's bad, maybe they're able to limit Jordan James and force Dylan Gabriel to I don't. But the thing is, Dylan Gabriel against Maryland's secondary, that should be an all-you-can-eat buffet. Maryland terrible against the pass. So that if you like Maryland, that's your angle. You're saying, hey, the weather's going to be shitty. Maryland's coming in here, and they have the ability to limit the Oregon rushing attack. And I don't think there's that logic. That logic is completely flawed. But based on what we've seen from Maryland's secondary this year, I don't know how you try. I mean, Dylan Gabriel's going to drop back, and he probably can go through his progressions and just pick which one he wants to move the chains with. Every single receiver should be open. The secondary isn't good. So, yeah, it would only be Oregon for me here.
Wow. The weather's not going to be terrible until probably late in the game, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But I went with Dylan Gabriel over 200 and let me just look this up. I can't remember the exact number. 274. So on our NBC show, if anybody want to watch this on Spotify, Bet the Edge, it's every Thursday. We were playing predict the line, right? That's one of my favorite things to do is just guess the line. What line will we take it? at what number. I predicted his line would be 300.5, but I said fair line would probably be 289. It opened up at 274.5. This is a team who, even if they're going to run the ball 28 times, they're still throwing the ball a lot because they play at a really high pace. They're playing against a very bad Maryland team. And actually what I've learned about Dan Lanning is I got on him a little bit about resting players and taking players out and stuff, but that's really only been when they've been on the road and up. When they've been at home and have been up, they ran their offense pretty much until like 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter, regardless of the score. Dylan Gabriel playing at a super high efficiency, leads the nation out of all qualified quarterbacks in passing completion percentage. ADOT is about 7.4, I believe, which is up there with Cam Ward, who's at 7.9, who throws, up there with Carson Beck, who's at about 7.9, and it's higher than Cam Ward, who's about 6.9, which means, yes, he's throwing a lot of the dinks and dunks and completing at a high clip, but he's also taking his shots. They lose their big play threat in Tez Johnson for probably the season with a collarbone, but they still have Evan Stewart. They still have Trayshawn Holden, which is good enough for me. I think they throw the ball against on a really bad passing defense.
Moose?
Maryland's been pretty simple for me. If you have a good pass rush, you should be able to beat Maryland by 30. That's pretty much been the way it is since the Northwestern game specifically. Billy Edwards, when the numbers don't seem to like insinuate that he's bad with pressure, but he is. Like, if you watch games, they can't handle it. He throws the ball away quickly. They get into bad situations very quickly when they're under pressure. And that, Oregon should be able to get him on the ground or get him under pressure very easily in this game. The Maryland O-line is one of the worst in the Power 5. They've also got one of the Power 4. They're also one of the worst secondaries in the Power 4. They have a lot of bad to them. They're good as good. Like, their pass rush is really good. Billy Edwards, when he's clean pocket, got a good arm. He can run a little bit too. Like, they have some good, but their bad is really bad. So this, assuming the weather stays fine, I think Oregon should be able to win this one by 30, 40 points. It should be very ugly.
Ducks across the board next game. So last night in the video I uploaded, I said Tennessee first half minus 13.5. I guess. I don't know, honestly. I guess that'd be my pick for the game. I have no interest in betting this one or even talking about it, to be honest. Mississippi State is capable of scoring, but on the road in Tennessee, it's one of the toughest places to score in the country. So Tennessee first half minus 13. Can you even still get that? Let me look. That's where I was at last night. Let's see if you can still get that. Tennessee first half. Why isn't it popping up? Oh, there it is. 14.5 now. Yeah, I'm good. Just pass for me. By the way, the reason I'm hesitant to lay the 24.5, like I said, Mississippi State is capable of scoring. They do have an offense. Their defense is terrible. Tennessee goes to Athens next week at Georgia. I think it's very realistic that Tennessee goes up 38 points, takes the foot off the gas, and Mississippi State scores a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter because they are capable of scoring on Tennessee's second unit. So just straight pass for me.
If this wasn't a look-ahead spot,
right,
I would be smashing Mississippi State team total under 7.5 in the first half. Tennessee, number 2 in the nation, behind Army and points allowed in the first half. Yes, they allowed 10 points to Kentucky in the first half, but that game was kind of a wonky game. And also, this is a night game in Neyland, which is like one of the most difficult environments to play. And Tennessee is a top 10 team, right? It's difficult when they are like freaking bottom feeders season where they're 500 and they pack the house out. Now they are, knocking on the door of the SEC championship. But you can't ignore a road trip coming up in Athens for a spot in the SEC championship. I could see some early complacency in this game, which is enough for me to back off. This sounds so sorry. I'm sorry, Volunteer fans, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Mississippi State win this game.
What?
I was say similar.
And it has nothing to do with skill, but this is the biggest game that they're going to have coming up with a freshman quarterback. Well, you know what I mean. Redshirt freshman quarterback. Their offense is not good already. You know, like it just feels one of those situations where you're like, wow, how did that happen? 24.5-point favorite, and Mississippi State, who offense can come to life at some points. You saw what they did against Georgia, right? You know, like could be a big shock. There's going to be a big shock this week. We just got to figure out which game it's going to be.
I thought I took a shot on Mississippi State last week against Arkansas. I thought that was the spot to take them. I was very wrong.
Yeah, I was going to say similarly, this would be the shock to me today. Usually when you try to predict one, you're very off. But this would be, if there were a top team to go down, this would be my guess. This is a really capable Mississippi State team. Kept it close with Texas. They competed a little bit with Georgia. They covered the first half spread. I remember that one. The only team they really got blown out by lately was Arkansas, which really wasn't even, that was Arkansas. They didn't expect it to be that bad, but they've tended to play pretty well against some of the better teams. Now, is that just fool's gold and that's old games? Maybe, but Tennessee look ahead spot. They hyped their season around the Georgia game pretty much and the Alabama game too. They hyped their season around those two games and they won one of them already. So, next week's going to probably be the biggest game in Tennessee's season, biggest game in their recent history too, because it's going to be a road game in Georgia. So, it is the ultimate look ahead spot. So I would take Mississippi State. If there was a game today where you were going to take a shot on somebody, it'd probably be Mississippi State. Would not be surprised if I looked up fourth quarter and it's a really close game, or this one winds up in overtime. I would not be surprised.
All right, next game. UCF. Oh, actually, Brad, this is your hometown here. You live right by UCF, right? I know this game isn't in UCF, but
yeah, I live close enough now. Yeah, I used to actually. I grew up on the same road as UCF.
So Knights money line here.
I actually think.
Yeah, I think they're gonna win too.
I think they're gonna win too. No Scatterboo either for Arizona State. I think it's like their homecoming for Arizona State or something. I can't remember. I was trying to figure it out, but Dylan Risks is the coming of Jesus that we needed, right? Like 290 yards against Arizona. Only 5 incompletions, 3 touchdowns. Looked good against BYU too. Like they brought him in and like, wow, he balled out. He makes, with an effective quarterback, he makes RJ Harvey's life so much easier. RJ Harvey ran the ball for 184 yards, ripping off big chunks because they couldn't just stack the box. So I really like UCF here. It's just, man, it just feels right. It just feels right. And I don't even have like numbers that back up my claims for UCF, because like if I look at my numbers, if I look at them here, I believe I have this being fairly priced. Yeah, I have it pretty close to fairly priced, but it's just a different vibe with this Knights team.
Yeah, I didn't bet this one, but this is one of the games I wrote as I in the section on the website. I put like games I like but didn't bet, and this was in there. I think UCF wins this game, honestly. Like he said, no Scatterboo for Arizona State. He's such a big part of that offense. I mean, Sam Levitt has shown us he's capable. I mean, he's made some plays and had some big games. I've faded Sam Levitt and paid for it a couple times this year. But this UCF offense, I mean, it's been a top 10 rushing attack this entire season. Problem is the inconsistency from the passing attack. If this kid Risk, or whatever his name is, if this kid gives them an average passing attack, then UCF might be one of the most dangerous offenses in the country. I mean, what they did last week to Arizona in bad weather was nuts. That was abusive. So Arizona State, yes, a tough defensive front. Maybe they're able to give UCF some problems in terms of establishing the run. But number one, UCF, I think that rushing attack's good enough where they could pretty much run on anybody. So I still think they'll be able to run the ball a little bit. And two, Arizona State's secondary has shown us that you can't trust them. So if this kid Risk is if that's what he is, if that wasn't an anomaly, UCF should score points in this game. And Arizona State with no Scatterboo, let's do it. Knights up.
Let's go.
I'm going to be on the other side. I will say they're down to their third string back because they're actually Scatterboo wasn't even supposed to be their starter. Their starter was supposed to be the other. I believe last name's Brown. I think it's Rakeem Brown or something of that nature. He wound up redshirting because he hasn't played enough games, so they decided to redshirt him and save him for next year. So they're down to their third string running back, but I think the way Sam Levitt's played gives me some confidence that he can win him a game. It's on the other side. I don't like to prey on people's downfall here, but I think that was an anomaly. I don't think that's the player that he is. If he's half as good as he was last week, then he's still a really good quarterback, but I don't think they stepped into a superstar here with how perfect he was last week. So I think the quarterback play will go down. I do trust this Arizona State run defense. It has been really good this year, pretty much against a couple of teams that run the ball well. Kansas is a team that runs the ball well. They played pretty well against them. Utah's a whatever offense. They can run it a little bit. So they haven't played either of those in the last 2 weeks, but yeah, they've been a good run defense. So I think that they can stop RJ Harvey and make the young guy have to play like he did last week. And I mean, he would have to be perfect again. I mean, if he's perfect again, then I'll just eat my words. But I mean, he was amazing last week. But we'll see what
you're gonna eat your words.
Levitt here.
Yeah,
charge on.
Back Sam Levitt.
I'm backing him.
Next,
former Sparty.
I laid the points here. I'm liking the way TCU is playing. I know they lost last week, but that was a great game. Came down to the wire. I had TCU I think I got a +3.5, so I think I actually won. But I also had TCU money line, which lost. They lost by 3 to Baylor. Did it go? It either went to overtime or it lost at the very end. It did go to overtime. Yeah. So what I'm liking from TCU is they're starting to play some defense. And I know you look at the final score of their last 2 games and be like, what are you talking about defense? They've given up like 35 points back-to-back weeks. True. But one of those games was against Texas Tech. And when you have a game like TCU versus Texas Tech, 35-34 doesn't necessarily mean the defense have played poorly. Remember, both those teams throw the ball a lot. Both those teams run a really fast pace. It's the type of game where each offense might have 15 possessions. So the final score isn't a good indication of how the defense is playing. If you look at TCU's numbers defensively over the last handful of games, there's no question that this team, the defense, has taken a serious step forward. They played a great defensive game against Utah, a great defensive game against Texas Tech. I know the final scored 34 points on it. They allowed just 3.6 yards per carry, 6.8 yards per pass attempt. TCU defense has turned a corner about a month ago. They're playing a different brand of defense. And if you're able to make stops against Oklahoma State, I mean, the sky's the limit. 10.5, 14, doesn't matter. If you're able to make stops against Oklahoma State, you're going to score religiously on that defense. Oklahoma State's defense is next level bad. So TCU at home, Hoover should throw for 500 yards in this one. In fact, I wouldn't even be mad at Hoover, 500 plus yards at the plus whatever that is. He should be able to do whatever he wants from the quarterback position here. And the thing is with Oklahoma State, I know I'm hesitant to lay. Normally, I'm hesitant to lay a number like this to a coach like Gundy. At what point are they done? At what point have they mentally checked out? Because
they were done about 3 weeks ago.
They were done about 3 weeks ago, Andy?
Yeah. Gundy's dead, respectfully. They
you think Gundy's on the hot seat?
No, he will never be fired. He will either have to resign or retire. Like they will never fight. So this is just a disaster for them for the future. They're going to be in a tough spot for a few years now. But I think TCU covers as well. A little scary because the number's a little higher than I usually be comfortable in a Big 12 game like this. But Oklahoma State can't stop anything, anybody, anything. They are an awful defense. This is not a Gundy team. This is the biggest surprise in college. A lot of people are surprised about Florida State, and look, everybody's surprised about Florida State, right? This is one of the biggest surprises as well. They were one of the favorites to win the Big 12. They're awful. I mean, they're not going. They'd have to win out to make a bowl game. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year Oklahoma State's not going to a bowl game, I would have slapped you in the face. I would have called you crazy. They're that bad that they're not even going to a bowl game. It's a disaster there. Yeah, I think TCU can run up the score here if they want to, because Hoover, especially at home, he's been much better at home. He's a lot like Barrett Morton in that way, but they're better at home. I mean, sometimes that's the way it is. There's just no redeeming quality about the Oklahoma State offense. I mean, Bowman's been a little bit better maybe, but they've got no running game. They've got bad O-line. I mean, there's just nothing there. Actually, the O-line's been the one positive spot, but it hasn't been able to shine because the running game hasn't done anything. So they've been in bad spots. So they've got a good pass blocking team, but they can't run block because they're not running the ball. So it's a disaster there. Good. I don't know. Good job, I guess.
Yeah, really, really bad running team here. It's funny because, like, this is a side that, last season was running the ball with high effectiveness. Then they went from being a team that, kind of was getting 2 to 3 yards of push. Then all of a sudden it started to go like slower and slower when the offensive line coach ended up, I can't remember what happened to the offensive line coach. But anyways, the offensive line's not getting that push. It moved down from like 2 to 3, closer to 1 to 2 yards before contact, which is like a massive jump for someone who is running the ball a crap ton of times. I didn't know what to think. Like, I thought TCU should dominate in this game. Pass. Hoover has a big game. We'll see what happens. I didn't really have much for this game.
All right, let's move on to the next one.
This is a heater. I mean, this is a good one.
Oh, I have this one.
All right, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a bet in this one. I actually am super pissed because you never give out a show on NBC and then not lock it in before it goes live. And I freaking did, and the line moved. So I pivoted to a second play, but I went with Notre Dame minus 14 first half against Florida State. Florida State's team total for the entire game is 7.5, which was actually 6.5. And then some sicko must have bet them up and gave it out. Sure, they score 7. They might score. Brock Glenn in this game, not good. The offense is really sad too. This is one of those situations where, we talk about teams that get better, get worse through the transfer portal. They got worse, but their biggest issue is not really it's not from transfer portal, right? Like, yeah, DJU was a miss, but they returned the most offensive line starts in the country, and that's their biggest weakness. Like that, it's not like you have a bunch of new guys there. You have a offensive line who is all real familiar with each other, familiar with playing each other, and then the bad offensive line play bled into the bad running play, bled into the bad quarterback play. Yeah, DJU wasn't a good quarterback, but now this Florida State team is kind of in a weird situation where there's no optimism for their season. They can't make a bowl game. There's no such thing as going out there and playing with pride when you're Mike Norvell and yes, things aren't going well this year. What the hell are we going to do next year? You have to get your young guys reps. And if you look at their depth chart, there's a lot of ors on there. This guy's playing or this guy's playing. And Mike Norvell, it's been pretty apparent he's getting these young guys playing time. Well, when you're playing in South Bend against a really elite defense, young guys just aren't going to get the job done for me. I think Notre Dame go out there and they start fast. Also, I like Riley Leonard to run a ton. The line's all the way up to 66, but man, I'm pro Notre Dame all the way. I think they win in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that team total for Florida State is pretty warranted. I don't know how you could have faith in Florida State's offense scoring some points here on the road in South Bend. So, nothing for me.
Brad had a very telling statement there, and it's the way that I've been looking at it. I don't know how they go. I don't know how you don't fire Norvell. How do you go into next year? Like, how do you not start from scratch?
They can't fire him.
You can't fire Norvell and stop it.
They owe him so much money.
It'll be interesting to see, but yeah, I would be on Notre Dame. That team total is very telling. I mean, they're a disaster. They have no optimism, like you said. Like, it's tough to go in, and now you're going to South Bend. It's just a disaster for them. So, Notre Dame, some teams, maybe they're respectful and they won't want to blow you out. Too bad. I think this is a situation where Notre Dame hasn't necessarily had many of these opportunities. They did blow out Stanford, but they haven't had many of these opportunities to just crush their opponent like this. They did it with Navy, but they didn't think they were going to. This is a game where they're going in knowing they can win it by a lot and help their stance in the college football playoff, help some of the metrics. So, I mean, that's kind of the world we live in at this point. So I think that they'll be trying to run up the score the entire time. So I think it'll be very ugly.
Next. This next game, I got to ask here. I don't know if I'm missing something. I bet it. How is this total over 40? Who's getting this total over 40? Which of these teams is scoring 20 points in this game? I have the under at 41.5. I think this total should be at 36.5. Why is this over 40? Who's scoring points? So yeah, under for me. It shouldn't even need a description. These are bad offenses against good defenses. So I honestly think the final score of this game could be 13-10. So yeah, I think it stays way under. In fact, I was a little uncomfortable with the total. Am I missing something here?
You know what happens? This is what happens in college football, especially in the SEC, is we get to November and these SEC teams are playing FCS schools, and we get this thing called Fool's Gold. Jackson Arnold gets benched during the season. Javonte Barnes sucks during the season, and they try out 3 different running backs in this backfield, and they're not getting any push. Then they go and play Maine, score 59 points. Jackson Arnold, 2 touchdowns, 15 for 21. Javonte Barnes, 203 yards. Fool's gold. I stayed away from this game in terms like when you see that and you're like, oh, maybe Jackson Arnold's gonna be playing better, right? Like there's no Brady Cook for Missouri. You can't take the -3. I don't mind the under at all. 2 really stout defenses, 2 teams that are gonna probably play pretty slow in this game as well. And if it's true, Nate Noel is gonna be back, which means now you have Carroll and Noel, which means Missouri's gonna run the ball at a very high clip with no Cook. Yeah, under's probably the way to go. Like if you lose this under at 41, 42, whatever it is, like you could probably live with it.
Yeah, and I think Noel, like you said, I like the way you phrased that. I think Noel being back might even help the under because they're going to stick to the run game, and I don't know if they're going to be able to run it against Venables. My bad. All right, there we go. My voice was echoing back to me. I don't know if they're going to be able to run it against Venables' defensive front here. So I think Noel back might even help the under.
I was looking at this earlier in the week, and I was curious when I saw the line drop, and that kind of told me Brady Cook wasn't going to play. Drew Pine looked god awful in that game against Alabama as well. I would still lean Missouri though, because I think that they'll have the run game to back them up. Oklahoma got off to a slow start against Maine and then crushed them. The Missouri defense is solid enough to where I think that Oklahoma will kind of just revert back to the offense they were before, which isn't very good at all. So the under would be a good play because neither one of these teams will be able to score. So I think you get into who will have better field position. You get into the kicking aspect, who has better, special teams. So in a close game where there's no scoring, where there's not going to be scoring, I would prefer to have Missouri, the home team, as well. So yeah, I think they'll be able to run the ball. So yeah, Missouri.
Next. Washington, Penn State. So when I was doing the video last night, I didn't get to this game. And at the very end of the video, if you watch the whole thing, I was like, guys, didn't have time to get to it. I'm leaning towards Penn State minus the points. Was actually looking at it late last night before I went to sleep. And I kind of think this goes over the total. I think I switched my favorite pick in this game to the over. What do we know about Will Rogers and this Washington offense? Gets rid of the ball quickly. 3-step drop out, 5-step drop out. Gets the ball out quickly. Kind of offense that could give Penn State a defensive front that's reliant on getting to the quarterback, give them problems. So, I think Washington's able to move the chains a little bit in this game. Not to mention, it's not like we haven't seen teams move the ball on Penn State. Didn't we see Connor Bazelak make some throws on Penn State? We saw Miller Moss throw the ball on Penn State. So even though this Penn State defense is elite, specifically against the run, we have seen teams throw the ball and complete passes on Penn State. And on the other side, I think Penn State is a powerhouse offensively. I can't believe that they finished the last game with only 13 points on the board or whatever the final score was. That's crazy. So I don't think Washington's defense is very good. As I said last week when I took USC, I know they got the win, but Penn State at home coming off the loss, I think they really are going to beat the hell out of Washington's defense. So I think this game goes back and forth. Washington, not the type of team that plays low-scoring games, so I think this gets up and over the total. I actually might bet this, to be honest, as I'm like talking myself into it.
Was it 45?
Yeah, our graphic says 45.5. Let me look. Oh, is it up at 47.5 now?
Wow.
Is that what it's at? Hold on, let me pull it up.
I'll pull it up right here. Oh, some shops have 48. Holy smokes.
Damn it. This number's gone. Change my graphic to over 47.5, but I don't think I'll bet it. Damn it! I probably should have just taken it instead of just. All right.
Wow, there's no 47. There's no 46.5 left.
It was just 45.5 when I was looking at it late last night.
I'll go real quick because I really like Washington here. I bet it earlier in the week. I trust this defense. They were all against me last week.
Oh my God, stop it!
I know it was Miller Moss. They caught a body. They got Miller Moss benched. Like, this is a good pass.
They say they caught a body. That's how you phrased it.
That's how I phrased it. And it's perfect. They are a really good defense. They're a Belichick defense. I don't know if you knew that. Steve Belichick. They've been good. They're going to continue to be good. And Penn State, as good as their defense is, you can see that when they face a quarterback of any note, not just, we know who Will Rogers is, but we know that he's a pretty good quarterback. Face Will Howard, they struggled a little bit. Connor Bazelak a little bit. Miller Moss, right? Any quarterback of that nature, they have success on them. And if Washington's having success in this game, I don't think the Penn State can cover 2 touchdowns. I know that there's a lot of people that think, well, after losing to Ohio State, this is a prime spot for Penn State to come in and just run them out of the building. I don't see that. I think there's going to be a little bit of an emotional hangover for them. It's Washington, who's kind of been steady, consistent all year, been good. So it's a really tough game for them to nearly cover 2 touchdowns. I got it at 13.5, but it's now 12.5. It's not a key number or anything. It was 14 earlier in the week, and I should have bet it immediately, but it got down a point, so it's not 2 touchdowns anymore. But yeah, I think that this Washington defense is just really good. So Washington.
All right.
I actually lean Penn State here first and foremost. Getting Miller Moss bench wasn't just because of this game. It is no lie. Washington has an elite pass defense, best pass defense in the country. But Miller Moss's numbers were horrid before that game. I think that was the writing on the wall. There was like an alarming stat I saw about James Franklin. I wish I would have wrote it down. Coming off a loss, it's just phenomenal. And I can't just take those trends. I'm not going to just bet like that, right? But for me, it's the ability to hit the weaknesses of Washington. Washington's weakness is the run game. We saw that with Woody Marks last week. Well, now you have Singleton and Katron Allen running the ball. Penn State don't have to be ballers through the air there. I think they'll be able to pound it, which at the same time also kind of makes me afraid of taking the almost 2 touchdown spread, which is why I didn't physically lock it in. Penn State were actually really good against Will Howard. I always judge it based on if a quarterback stays under the projected total, right? Will Howard stayed under their total. Miller Moss went over his total barely, but Will Howard was the shock to me. I thought Will Howard looked shaky, and Buckeye fans will probably tell you, oh man, we got kind of lucky to walk away with a win. But I just think, Penn State going to bounce back hard. From a numbers perspective, let me just stop talking about anecdotal stuff and give you some actually real numbers, because that's going to make it a little bit more important. Penn State's running the ball a lot less than they were before, right? But teams are actually running the ball on Washington a ton more, 93rd in rush rate over expected, which means I think that this is just one of those situations where Franklin's let's get back to what we do well and run the ball. And then we just stop Will Rogers from moving the chains. Washington's playing with a little bit of a swagger here, but I got to go with Penn State minus the 12.5.
I was kind of leaning towards the Penn State side also, but over for me. Next. I know that we just saw the sell high spot on Pitt, but I kind of still think we can sell high on Pitt with this over a touchdown to Virginia. Andy, it's got to be Virginia, right? I didn't bet this one, but it's got to be Virginia.
I have the under. I didn't like a side. I think the numbers.
I like that too.
Yeah, I think that. Pitt's offense has been pretty putrid. They did score 41 points against Syracuse, but they didn't offensively score much of that. Their offense has been putrid lately, and I don't trust this Virginia team, so I just took the under. The only thing that scares me, Pitt's pace seems to be picked up this year, right? That's what they wanted to do with the new coordinator, but I don't think that scares me. Virginia's defense has been solid enough. I just don't think the offenses are going to be able to really do anything in this one. So a high number, near 60 is surprising for this. This is not a game that these teams usually would be at this point. Granted that Narduzzi offense used to run much slower, but I like the under.
Yeah, I would lean to. I don't hate an under, by the way, and I would lean towards the Virginia side. I'm still not convinced these two teams are a touchdown apart. A lot of things have bounced Pittsburgh's way at the end of games. I like this Virginia team. I think they have a tough defensive front. I didn't bet this one because I feel like I don't have a great feel for Virginia. But yeah, at more than a touchdown, there's no way I'm laying it with Pitt. I almost laid the points with SMU against Pitt last week. I wish I did. They beat the hell out of them. So yeah, I think this Pitt team is coming back down to earth, and they still haven't bottomed out. I think this number should be 4.5. So yeah, it would only be Virginia for me here.
Before we get into this, I got a note from someone who's monitoring the Georgia Tech situation, said that Haynes King is not looking good going through warmups. For anybody who's interested on that, just said he's not looking good. Don't know if that means he's going to play or not, but movement doesn't look good. Anyways, Eli Holstein's number is probably the most fun number. I want to take his over 274.5. There's just so much value on that number. You think about a guy who's going to be throwing the ball a ton, a guy who is up against a Virginia team who's 76th in EPA dropback and 70th, I think 80th in EPA dropback success. Holstein needs this game, right? Like, this Pitt team needs this game to go their way because they started out so hot, played some really legitimate teams, and kind of fizzled off. And I actually think their undoing was against Syracuse. And why I say that was because they had so much positive aversion, right? Like, positive, I don't even know the right way to say it, but all the bad shit happened to Syracuse, and Pitt kind of reaped those benefits. Then they had to get back down to reality. So for me, I like Eli Holstein. I don't lean aside or anything, but his number, it's literally minus 108 for 274.5. And you know that this is going to be a little bit of a shootout, and Pitt want to kind of go out there and prove that they are a legitimate team.
All right, let's move on to the next one, which is an interesting one. This one's a late 10:15 p.m. kickoff for BYU Utah. When it was up, I think this number was up at 4. When it was up there, I completely got people taking Utah. But now that it's under 3, I was, by the way, I wasn't taking Utah at +4. I'm just saying I understood it. Utah's defense, especially at home, I get it. But now that it's under 3, I mean, how do you not go BYU? They've been the much better team, and it's if you're worried about a sketchy line or playing the square side, I mean, I get that, but the market has consistently been incorrect about this BYU team. I mean, they were catching points against UCF last week. If it's under a field goal, it's BYU. This Utah offense is pretty terrible. Let's be honest. It's not good at all. It's going to be a struggle for BYU to go in here and score points. I'll give you that. But Retzlaff has been through some shit, man. He's been through adversity, and he keeps coming out. He keeps showing everyone that it's not a fluke. I am a good quarterback. They can play at the Big 12 level. Right? I mean, BYU's the better team, and it's under a field goal. So if you can get a 2.5 BYU, can you get a 2.5 right now? Let me check.
I have it open right now. Let's see. Is there anyone at 2.5? No, not yet.
Damn it. All right. So, damn it. In fact, I see a couple 3.5s. So at -3, BYU's my pick. I haven't bet it. If I see a 2.5 during the day, I'll bet it. That's what I'm going with.
This actually, the EV monitor says that Utah plus 3.5 is a horrible bet. That's funny. I never really checked that, but I just thought it was funny. I was like looking at it. Okay, listen. First and foremost, this is a Utah team that, you know, they want to run the ball, right? 84th in rush rate over expected. When you are running the ball, you're going to want to get push, right? Like, you want to be a powerful unit. They're not. Stuff rate, horrible for rushing success. Rush yards, line yards per rush, 2.9, which is like bad. We were just talking about how a 3 was like where you wanted to be. Not good. Offensively, wide receivers aren't doing anything. They're not good in the drop back either. Like, so it's a combination of quarterback play being bad mixed in with bad wide receiver play against a BYU team who's battle tested, right? Like they played UCF really tough in Central Florida during homecoming in the heat. It was hot as hell. Now they're playing a night game, another tough environment. I can't believe this line's coming down. There's nothing in my numbers that I look at that makes me want to take Utah. Really bad at explosiveness, giving up big explosive plays through the air. Well, this is a BYU team who, they run the ball a ton, and their success from Retzlaff comes from the explosive passes. Like, it's a recipe for success. I haven't locked this in, right? Because I saw the number coming down. I'm literally just patiently waiting. Because if this drops more, I don't care. I'm taking BYU money line, and I'm not even thinking twice about it.
Yeah, I agree fully. And because this is a late start time, does give us some time to hopefully get a better number. I mean, I'll probably, because it's late 10-15, I'll probably end up putting a bet on BYU later on in the day, because like after the long day, it's like, shit, this game's starting, and then people in the Discord are like, yo, let's do it. And it's like, well, I don't want to miss the party, so I'll probably put a bet on this game. But yeah, BYU's for me. Andy, you're not on Utah.
I want to be, but I can't. They're just so bad. Like, it is the perfect Whittingham spot. They play
No,
spoiler
it's not, bro.
They play spoiler every single year, but this is their worst team, and it's not even close. Like, they are, and it's not their fault. They I guess it is technically their fault, because they literally put every chip on a Cam Rising, and that's their fault. But like, it is in years past, this would be the perfect Whittingham spot. Spoiler, teams going to the looks like BYU's going to the playoffs, trip up in Utah. But this is not a good football team for Utah. They're bad. They're not good. BYU, really good. That's just a simple way to put it. They're just, the way they've played. It's so surprising to me, but that they have played perfectly all year. Retzlaff has handled everything that's been thrown at them. They went on the road, actually, I think it was a home game. They faced Gundy and Oklahoma State. Looked like they were going to lose, and they came back and won, right? Like, they've handled everything they needed to handle. They were dogs against UCF, and they crushed them. Like, that's just the team they've been. So this line doesn't scare me a bit. It seems as if they can handle anything you throw at them. So BYU.
Oh, BYU. I was okay. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I wish I could bet Utah here. They're just that bad, because it is their spot. But
so bad. Someone said, where was the comment? It was Blunt. Hold on, it's right here. Oh, here we go. -2.5 is not a trap at all. Utah's been overvalued all season, and and it makes sense if you look at the ATS records. BYU 7-1 against the number. Utah 2-6 against the number. Means the market has been dramatically overvaluing Utah all year and dramatically undervaluing BYU all year. So in terms of, this line looks weird, yeah, they've been off all year with these two teams. So anyway, Georgia, Ole Miss. Andy, I'm sorry for what's about to happen to you today.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Andy. Tell us why you're going to lay points on the road with what might be the worst team.
To me, not to sound too homerish, we've seen it a couple of times. But the Alabama game was what it was, right? They came back, and that one made it close. We saw them go on the road to Texas and handle that. That was a team we perceived to be really good. It's just kind of two teams. They do different things, right? Georgia, they're really, really good at waking up for these big games. They play big games every year. Ole Miss, the same thing. They play big games every year. They don't show up for them, right? They have 2 losses already this year, one of them being to LSU. They just didn't show up for that one. It's kind of just the way that Georgia rolls. The Alabama, they haven't lost. What was the stat? They haven't lost to a team not named Alabama in 4 years. Like, I'm not going to go off of them at a field goal. When this was 5.5, yeah, I think Ole Miss would be the play. But at this point, you're basically picking the winner. And I think Georgia's going to win the game. They tend to wake up for these. Carson Beck, if Carson Beck isn't an interception machine, Georgia's offense is really, really good, right? That in their games that he doesn't throw interceptions, they score a lot of points. The games where he's throwing all these interceptions, Florida, Texas, Alabama, they happen to be the biggest games. They're not scoring as much. They're not consistent enough. They're not winning the games, right? The game against Alabama specifically. If he can limit the mistakes, I think they can beat Ole Miss just like they beat them last year. But at this point, you're basically picking the winner. So I pick Georgia.
Yeah, basically picking the winner there. I got a stat for you. Here you go. 30 and 3 as a road favorite is Mr. Kirby Smart. When's Lane Kiffin won the big game?
Today.
I just don't see it happening. The only worry I do have for this game is the offensive line. The defensive line for Ole Miss is the real deal. They get pressure on the quarterback. Carson Beck in his last 2 games, and all you data nerds don't get mad at me because I'm literally doing this off memory, but Carson Beck in his last 2 games, 5 for 20, 17 yards, 2 interceptions when under pressure. That is terrifying. And so I was watching, when I was watching the Florida game, I was like, oh man, like Florida's Carson Beck's getting crushed like anytime they disguise the coverages. And then I went and rewatched it again. It wasn't the disguised coverages in the secondary. His biggest issue is when they put a ton on the line and then he'd have to find responsibilities of where the pressure's coming from and who's dropping back into coverage. Like if I'm Pete Golding, I'm making that my recipe, right? Confuse Carson Beck as much as possible. I went with Georgia money line here. I just can't ignore the fact that Kirby Smart, when big games come, he just doesn't lose them, right? Like unless you're Nick Saban or Alabama, he's not losing these games. I also think Parrish being out and Trey Harris being out. Well, Trey Harris is doubtful. He's not officially out. It hurts that offense. I think we see a little bit of Caden Lee. I want to take Caden Lee's numbers, but I'm going to wait till they officially roll out Harris. I think he has a big game here. But yeah, I have to just side with Georgia. I don't know what the status of ETN is. I know he had bruised ribs. Is he going to end up playing in this one?
I don't know. Last I heard was game time decision.
That also hurts them. But if he doesn't play, y'all go ahead and just take Carson Beck passing over 270, 277. I don't care that they're playing in the wind because he's still going to throw the ball 40 times. He's thrown the ball 40 straight times. Throw the ball 40 times in 3 straight games. Like, that's just volume.
Yeah, I think you guys are wrong. So first of all, full transparency, my bet is Ole Miss +3, which obviously is a lot better. But I do think Ole Miss wins the game. I didn't bet the money line though. So you guys saying Georgia money line, it's not that, like if it was a pick 'em, maybe. But one of my favorite bets of the day is Ole Miss +3. And if you look at this matchup, so the teams are actually kind of similar in a couple ways. Number one, both these teams surprisingly struggling to run the ball this year. I mean, as Brad just mentioned, Parrish might be out for Ole Miss, but Ole Miss has been struggling to run the ball for a month now. So Ole Miss not going to be able to run the ball in Georgia, but you could say the same thing on the other side. Georgia's been struggling to run the ball all year on the road against a top 5 defensive front. So Georgia ain't going to be able to run the ball either. So I expect both teams to struggle to run the ball, which means we got quarterback versus quarterback in bad weather. Carson Beck, what has he shown us this year? He is a pick throwing machine. And what I think the more important aspect is, obviously, we know Carson Beck's been throwing picks. We can all laugh about it. He has been. But the more important aspect that we need to talk about, he's not as athletic as Jackson Dart in the bad weather. Jackson Dart can run. Jackson Dart can move. And I think that's a huge aspect of this game. That Ole Miss pass rush is coming for Carson Beck. And it's like Brad said, it's windy. There's some weather situations here. You trust Carson Beck dropping back 40 times on the road here against that pass rush? I think we're going to see a couple more picks. And on the other side, I think having the option, Jackson Dart having the option to use his legs is going to be huge. In my opinion, based on what we've seen so far, I don't know if I necessarily even think Georgia is the better team right now. And when I placed the bet, I was getting what I thought might have been at least the comparable team. Maybe I'm not going to say, especially with the injuries, I won't say Ole Miss is the better team, but I think they're very, very comparable. And I got the home team +3. I think it's a great bet. I truly, if you asked me to pick a winner, I would take Ole Miss, but it's not like, oh, I think Ole Miss is going to win the game. I just like the matchup for them. Let's go Rebels. I'm going to be texting.
Jackson Dart had terrible numbers against the Georgia defense last year. I know it's different because Georgia's defense isn't quite as good as it is last year, especially in the secondary. But that is something they schemed up against him really well. I think he had, I don't know what the exact stats were. I think he was like 11 of 7, something like that. It was like he had below 200 yards, which was surprising.
Also, Georgia's offense not nearly as good in their road games. All right, let's move on. Bama.
Oh, snap. Look alive.
And this is we get to go to the next game. We get to move on from Andy taking a loss to Brad taking a loss because I'm against the Tide here, Brad. You like the Tide?
That's fine. I took the +3.
Me too.
I'd be an irresponsible gambler not to take +3.
Exactly.
Alabama 1-3 against the spread on the road. The one game they did cover this season, they played against a backup quarterback. I actually didn't look good in that first quarter anyway before Van Dyke went down. But I do think Alabama have a really legitimate chance to win this game. Like, I don't think they're going to go into Death Valley and be at all intimidated. The road game at Neyland was probably the best thing that could happen for them, because in that game at Neyland, like, they were having trouble with the snap. They're having trouble with the snap count. DeBoer looks over, which is probably bad coaching at this point. Like, I think we need to go with silent count. Like, you probably should have figured that out before you go in there. But I think that's like a little good warm up there. My only reason, like, thinking about this game for Alabama, it's going to be hard to blow out LSU. Garrett Nussmeier is playing phenomenal. He's playing really phenomenal. He is the type of quarterback that can keep you in it for a very long time. My only question is, what kind of success does Nussmeier have throwing the ball a ton against this Alabama secondary? So Alabama secondary, they allow a lot of big plays, right? Like, that's no surprise there. But they're actually a pretty well-rated team. They get turnovers. That's what scares me. Like, even against Tennessee, where, excuse me, a game they lost, they were getting turnovers. They just couldn't score off them. So we'll see what happens in that. I do think that Alabama's going to struggle to run the ball as well. So it's going to be all up to Jalen Milroe. Is he finally healthy? That dude hasn't been healthy in quite some time. If he's not healthy, it could be a really ugly game really fast. A fun bet I'm going to give out to you guys. I took Aaron Anderson, 80+ receiving yards. It's like +285. And why I took Aaron Anderson at this number, when he goes over big, and it's because of big catches. What has Alabama's bugaboo been? I'm going to be fair to the defense. This number has changed drastically over the past few weeks. It's been third down defense and letting up explosive plays on third down defense. Haynes King officially a starter for anybody who's wondering. That's where Aaron Anderson has his chance to shine, is catching those big ones. So at that really big price, that really big number, I think it's something that you have to, at the very least, consider. And to tell you how much I like this bet and this number, I put a full unit on it.
Okay. All right. Are you worried about the weather at all?
No, weather's not horrible.
Good.
Yeah.
I some of these weather reports, I'm always hesitant on how seriously I take them, because the people putting them out, I mean, they're just trying to make a living and get clicks themselves. Yeah. So, like, the more dramatic they make the weather report, the more. But yeah, I'm on LSU here. If this game was in a neutral site, I can see this line. I can see Alabama laying 2.5 or 3 if this game was at a neutral site, but it's not. It's Saturday night at Death Valley. This place is going to be going absolutely nuts, and Miller's going to crumble here. This is one of the Saturday night at Death Valley is one of the toughest environments that exists in college football, and LSU's defense is actually playing well in the last few games. You got the pass rush coming. They're not getting run on. I know the second half of the Texas A&M game, they did get the ball moved on them. I mean, Texas A&M made a quarterback change over to Marcel Reed, may have caught him off guard a little bit. But as a whole, if you look at the last 4 games for LSU, they're playing some defense. Nussmeier, especially if the weather's going to be all right, it's probably the most electric passing attack in college football, and you should not be laying points to them at Death Valley on Saturday night. I think we've seen enough evidence to straight up say DeBoer's Alabama team ain't the same as Saban's. I mean, when's the last time Alabama played a game that impressed you? The first half of the Georgia game, well over a month and a half ago.
Fair. I want to step that back.
All right, which game impressed you?
This Alabama team hasn't been impressive for 3 years.
Oh, stop it. Come on.
Penalties every single play. Alabama for the last 3 years has led college football in penalties yardage per game. That's discipline. That's number one. Then they have the best quarterback in college football, but then have a bunch of farmers he's throwing the ball to, right? Like, what are you supposed to do that? Oh, they get some wide receivers, then they don't have any running backs. It hasn't been a great Alabama team, but I actually think Alabama has been pretty impressive this season, with the exception of the Vanderbilt game.
Okay, how about just the last 4 games? What impressed you? Because I'm saying since the first half of that Georgia game back in, what was that, September, I don't think Alabama's been impressive once. I mean, yeah, they beat up on Drew Pine, who threw him a bunch of interceptions, but I don't think Alabama's impressed me at all. In fact, I think it's been a month and a half since Alabama looked like a top 10 team.
I thought Alabama looked good against Tennessee. I think that that game was, they had 3 interceptions. They got 3 picks in that game. They playing in Neyland, which, not to remember, the last time Alabama went to Neyland, who was their coach, Nick Saban, they lost that game.
Yes, they did. To Hooker.
And it was a tough defensive battle that, probably could have gone either way. Jalen Milroe also played that game hurt, so I gave him a little bit of reprieve in that game. If they score 1 time off of the 3 turnovers, it's a different game. I thought they were pretty impressive. It's easy for me to say they're not impressive after a loss, right? But not all losses are weighted equally.
It sounds like you want to take the Tide here, man.
I want the Tide to win. Big difference. They say you gotta bet with your wallet, not your heart.
Yes. And I took the LSU money line too, by the way. Andy?
I'm on Alabama. I think they can win this one comfortably too. I will say this. I think LSU has a little bit of that Lane Kiffin Ole Miss effect at this point with Brian Kelly. He's kind of had this his whole career. They don't wake up for big games. They've struggled with that this year. The LSU game, LSU game. The USC game's a perfect example. That was the opener, but then they had the A&M one 2 weeks ago now because they had a bye. They've had an issue with some of those bigger games. Now, the biggest thing they've had an issue this year, LSU can't stop running quarterbacks. They needed Lenora Sellers to get hurt to win that South Carolina game. Jackson Dart ran on him a little bit, but then the sacks kind of ruined his stats. And we saw Marcel Reed run all over them.
Oh my God.
And if you're telling me that there's going to be a little bit of weather, and there is, it's going to get worse later in the game, but if you're telling me there's going to be weather, it means Alabama's going to want to run the ball and want to go run the ball with Jalen Milroe. And if you can't stop running quarterbacks, that's a disaster for you going up against him. I know that firsthand because against Georgia, he runs all over them like crazy. But if that's going to be LSU's biggest issue, then I don't know how they're going to stop them from getting first downs on third downs and stop him from scrambling around the field. I think that's going to be a legitimate issue for LSU. So I know Nussmeier, a lot of people love them and the way their offense runs and they can throw the ball down the field and all that and keep up in these games. But if they're going to have trouble getting off the field because their quarterback's running all over them, I think it could be a very bad game for this defense. And this defense is already bad enough. So, I like Alabama. I know they don't wake up for big games either, apparently, since the Georgia game, because they tend to, with DeBoer, they haven't been playing some of these games well either. But Brian Kelly has a bit of that Lane Kiffin struggle in big games. But
I don't think you really understand Death Valley on Saturday night, Andy.
People have died, as you say.
People get killed out there.
You get killed.
Many have fallen.
All right, so I'm running the community parlay, by the way. Cast your votes, and while they're voting, we had a super chat in. Leave the farmers alone.
I hate to say it.
Brad took a shot at the farmers. Speaking of Brad, you want to tell everyone where they can find your stuff while they're voting?
Yeah. Articles on NBCSports.com, and then you can go and to Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. We're even on Amazon. Every Thursday morning, Bet the Edge is the podcast. We give out all our college football plays. Me, Eric Froton, and Von Delzell.
Bet the Edge, Thursday mornings, wherever you get your podcasts. So the first leg of the community parlay is the Canes, Miami money line.
Andy, would you like to read your underdog?
Oh, yeah. All right, so first up, Darius Taylor, running back from Minnesota. Running backs against Rutgers has pretty much been free this year. Him higher than 105.5 rushing yards. Sorsby against West Virginia. Quarterbacks against West Virginia has also been pretty free this year, so him higher than 256.5. Davis Warren lower than 153.5. I'd be hard-pressed to see him get this number against anybody, but especially against Indiana. I think that one would be good. And then I just said it, Jalen Milroe over or higher than 47.5 rushing yards. LSU struggles with running quarterback. Sellers, Dart ran on him a little bit, and Marcel Reed. So I think that's become an issue for LSU. So that is the underdog.
So that is the underdog of the day. The free pick for any new customers is Kevin Durant, higher than a half total point. And if you aren't signed up yet and would like to sign up, you can become a customer in one of those eligible yellow states using the promo code BET, B-E-T. It's as simple as 3 letters.
3 letters. Like you're the attendant at Six Flags.
Just got to tell the people, man. Some people, spelling's hard these days.
Keep your arms and legs inside the cart at all times.
At all times. Visual scan, all clear.
So it's Miami money line, Iowa State money line, and the last leg of the community parlay. We're doing it right now because we're about to kick off, and we'll go Pitt money line. We got Utah, BYU. What did they like there? They like BYU. Georgia, Ole Miss. They like Georgia, and then they like Alabama. All right, what's the last leg of the community parlay? Cast your votes now.
What are the first 3 legs? I'll type
The first 3: Miami, Iowa State, Colorado. So go ahead, cast your votes. The last leg of this community parlay. Wow, BYU is running away with this one. We'll give it 5 more seconds, but it's going to be BYU. Oh, yeah. It's BYU by a landslide. BYU money line is the last leg. So the community parlay, Miami, Iowa State, Colorado, BYU for, I don't have the odds, but.
I'm trying to get it.
Yeah, so Miami, Iowa State, Colorado, BYU.
You can mentally calculate it, right?
Yeah, I'll mentally calculate it real quick. My bad.
Like Magneto.
Someone in the comments want to shout them out?
All right, I'm 1 leg away. BYU. Plus 476.
Plus 473. Thanks, everyone, for watching. See you all at 11 a.m. for the NFL show. Brad, thanks for joining. Let's go. Let's have a good Saturday. Please bet responsibly. Later.
There we go. Okay. Well.